Mas maganda pala na kapag ang isang observation ay manggagaling sa foreign entity or foreigner coming from a Chinese perspective.
I present to you a Chinese perspective on global geopolitical issues. On March 11th, the ex-president of Philippines, Duterte, was arrested by Philippines authority in Manila's main airport upon his return from Hong Kong. The arrest was executed by a warrant from International Criminal Court. This incident received minimum coverage in Western news outlet but created quite a stir among Chinese geopolitical analysts.
Sa Western media, baliktad. Project nila na si Duterte ay human rights violator.
First, going to let Professor Jin here to provide a very short explanation as to what happened from his perspective, which more or less represent the mainstream Chinese view on this issue. I also want to get feedback opinion from countries in Southeast Asia, especially from Filipinos, because this was your ex-president. I want to understand how you guys see this and how you guys feel, and what recommendation you guys have for China as to how to deal with similar things.
We urge that your China resident will help PRRD. Yun lang naman.
Things in the future. But first, let's take a look at Professor Jin's opinion. During Duterte's presidential term back in 2019, the Philippines left the International Criminal Court, so they are no longer a member of the organization. Because of this, the Philippines is not obligated to obey ICC's arrest order.
Not obligated.
However, the current president, Marcos Jr., plans to return the Philippines to the ICC. This is a political move because these two powerful families are having intensive infighting. Duterte's daughter, the current ex-president of Philippines, has been sidelined from politics and is currently going through impeachment process. This is a complicated issue involving both domestic rivalry and foreign affairs between US and China. The official narrative of ICC is during Duterte's war against drugs. He committed crime against humanity, killing over 6,000 people. Duterte, however, insists that he did the right thing for the good of the country, and at that time must utilize harsh measurement. During his time as mayor in his hometown, he did the same thing as well, using police force to violently crush down the cartels. When he became president, he enacted similar strategy across the entire country. From my understanding, the Philippines public opinion supported Duterte's effort, but the ICC considered his strategy and action too cruel, not up to the Western standard, which is why certain Western entities use this excuse to arrest him. However, Duterte's family relationship with Marcos Jr.'s family relationship is at odds. Now, with the ICC's support, he can openly arrest Duterte to weaken his family's position in the Philippines. When it comes to foreign supporter, I believe it is the West, or mainly the Americans, that are backing this decision. The United States is currently in a geopolitical competition with China, and during Duterte's 5 years as president, his relationship with China is pretty good, I would say. So I believe it is a way for the US to punish the Philippines' ex-president, to set an example that whoever gets close to China will be punished. Of course, I do not fully understand why he traveled back to the Philippines, knowing that the police was waiting for him. It could be his personality. He has a lot of self-esteem and confidence. He believes that he did the right thing for his country, and he's not in the wrong. He held his head up high no matter where he goes. Or perhaps he believed he has political supporters within the country, which led him to believe that the arrest might actually strengthen his position. Let's wait and see what kind of reaction Filipinos had regarding this. China's
mad.
official government response is roughly that the Philippines' internal judicial system should also get a chance to review the case. When the Philippines' judicial sentence matches the one of the ICC, it will make a more convenient case. But let's see what happens. Okay, that's a short summary from Professor Jin. Before I go to my own opinion about this arrest, I want to quickly go over the dispute in the South China Sea between Philippines and China. This has been a hot topic in recent years, and there are many videos on YouTube which shows you the basics. But I'm going to tell you the Chinese perspective of the South China Sea in a condensed version that you don't get to see in Western media space. First, China claimed the 9-line before the Chinese Communist Party even came to power back in 1947. That was called the 11-line. How the Western media portray this is that China is becoming more powerful now, so it started to claim this water, which it didn't before. So that's not true. Second, the Chinese approach to this is that, okay, I have a claim over this water, and you, Philippines, said that you have a claim as well. And since we can't solve this issue outright, how about we share this body of water peacefully?
Share.
Our fishermen can all fish here, and everyone's cargo ship can sail through these waters. And if there are natural resources discovered in here in the future, we can find ways to profit together. So that's China's approach, diplomatic solution. And historically speaking, that is what happened as well. You can check historical record, or if you just use ChatGPT, there were barely any military confrontation before 2012. Both China and Philippine fishermen
Before 2012 daw
were fishing there, just like they have been doing that for thousands of years. No one was chasing each other away. However, and again, let me remind you guys, this is Chinese narrative, okay? I'm not forcing this on anyone. You think about this and generate your own opinion, okay? However, after 2008 financial crisis, as I said before in other videos, US-China relationship started to deteriorate. So that's when US want to pursue a more aggressive containment policy towards China, including weaponizing its allies, or here we Chinese consider the Philippines as a close satellite of the United States, to provoke China. It first started in 2012. A Philippine Navy vessel started to chase away and detain Chinese fishing boats fishing in those bodies of water. You can check this information by yourself. So it was the Filipino Navy who made the first move. So before 2012, both countries tried to keep things rather blurry. But after 2012, Philippines was the first party to start enforcing what they call the EEZ. So China retaliated by chasing off Philippine vessels. All these then led to the famous 2016 international ruling of UNCLOS, which the full name is United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which resulted in
So 2012 ang nag-umpisa daw yung Philippine Navy chasing and detaining Chinese na mangingisda. So nag-retaliate ang China. So nagbalikan hanggang sa ito ay idinulog ni Pinoy sa United Nations. Kaya nagkaroon tayo ng on-clause arbitral ruling.
ruling in favor of the Philippines, and China do not recognize that ruling. To me, one of the key reasons why China held so firmly on claiming the South China Sea is more than just historical record claims, but also because of geostrategic interest. And this is where I want my audience to pay more attention to. By claiming the entire 9-line, even if that claim is blurry and not that well reinforced, China can freely interact and trade with all the countries in Southeast Asia without foreign colonial power coming in to say, contain China or to decide, who China can trade with or cannot trade with. A good example is the first island chain, which I think everybody know by now. It is a U.S. geopolitical containment strategy against China, running all the way from Japan to Taiwan and then to the Philippines. So to avoid being locked in, China will have to aggressively protect the claim of the 9-9 so it can keep its maritime sea trade open. This is, of course, not an issue when US-China relationship is good. But now when it is not good, any action taken by the Philippines is seen by China as a sign that US try to use the Philippines to further strangle China. I'm not forcing anyone to accept this narrative, but this is how China see this. So it is not an aggressive posture against countries in the Southeast Asia, but a defensive posture against US containment strategy. This is the same way how I would say Chinese intellectuals sees the war in Ukraine as well. We don't think Russia has a problem with Ukrainian living in Ukraine. Ukrainian has been, the land of Ukraine has been there for millions of years. We see it as US NATO, as a colonial power, try to hijack the country, Ukraine, and use it to contain Russia, which is also why I said it is not a good idea for example, Finland to join NATO, because Finland is kind of directly or indirectly, depending on how you see it, helping US NATO in containment or against Russia. So I believe it is very important for people in Eastern Europe and also now in Southeast Asia to understand how big power like China and Russia see this from a great power perspective and come to an understanding, or else there will be more conflict. Okay, back to the topic today. In Chinese social media, most people supported Duterte's position, believing that this is a dirty political move by the Americans to suppress a neutral or pro-China leadership in Philippines.
So Chinese social media daw yan,
which is how I see it as well. This is clearly a prearranged move, because thousands of government law enforcement was locking down the airport waiting for Duterte's return. A few points here to condense the whole event. Okay, first of all, like Professor Jin has said, Philippines is not even in the ICC. Why are they obeying it, right?
Exactly.
And second, you don't need thousands of police for one man's arrest. Not usually, but this one is definitely not just an ordinary person. They are there because the process is done in a shady way, and police are there to prevent Duterte's supporters in intervening with the process. Third point, Duterte has a lot of domestic supporters. It is more reasonable to have a local trial first, in the open, in relative fairness, so you don't get some kind of domestic backlash. I mean, imagine if, let's say, Kamala Harris or Joe Biden want to get rid of Trump in the election and have, thousands of FBI officers arrest Trump and send him to ICC or somewhere abroad. How would the Trump supporters feel about that? Yes, exactly. From the Chinese perspective, of course, we weight international affair more than domestic rivalry in the Philippines. To start with, the Philippines was a US colony from 1898 to 1946. And after World War II, although many countries officially declare independence, many colonial interests and practice still remained. This is something I need to talk about in a future video. But US influence over the Philippines has always been very strong. Political ties, economic ties, and military ties. The current president, Marcos Jr.'s own father, Ferdinand Marcos, was a well-known pro-US leader during the Cold War. During his father's realm in the Philippines, US even backed a martial law, a coup, basically, to help Ferdinand Marcos to stay in power as a pro-US satellite. This is very similar to other close US satellite here in Asia and also in other countries around the world. When US install a pro-US leader into power by so-called, democracy, it often help weaponize the country's judicial system to help keep that pro-US leader in power. And when the local population is unhappy and when the existing pro-US leader is about to lose power, US often help to instigate a coup or let's say a banning of election or martial law or jailing of political opponents in order to help maintain the pro-US leaders in power. And we see
Parang yung sa EDSA, nung una kasi pro-US si Marcos Sr., kosa niya yung Amerika. Pero later on, nung yun, napupuno na yung mga tao, they ditch, tinapon nila. Initsapwere nila si Marcos Sr. At kaya sabi niya gagawin ng lahat ng US para magain yung political pro-leader, US pro-leader. So anong ginawa nila? Nag-install sila ng bago, which is yung si Cory.
Seeing something very similar recently in, let's say, South Korea or Taiwan or Romania. Something to think about, okay? So, from China's point of view, the current president of the Philippines, Marcos Jr., has little power when it comes to foreign policy and alignment. If he dares
Parang sinabi mong bobo
to disobey his master, he will be sent to the ICC. Dares to disobey foreign policy and alignment. If he dares to disobey his master, he will be sent to the ICC, just like Duterte here. This is a problem, however, because the relationship China has with Duterte is relatively good. From the Chinese perspective, he is more independent and approachable. I think that's the reason why he's arrested. The unease among Chinese geopolitical analysts in China is that the US will likely try to pressure, punish, and even regime change any country's leader that is pro-China, especially Chinese neighboring countries. And because US foreign intervention is so efficient and so powerful, it is very difficult for a smaller country to defend against it. This will automatically signal to the rest of the countries in the region that if you get close to China, you will get the beating from the United States. And if China don't do anything to help Duterte here, it will further cast doubt in other countries in the region as well. Why would other countries in the region befriend China from now on when China is not there to protect them?
Exactly.
Do you guys see my point here? Well, we are in a certain dilemma here, okay? China pursued this kind of minimalistic foreign intervention policy and want to uphold international organization like the UN. There are, I would say, more aggressive Chinese nationalists who suggest we should do a regime change operation in the Philippines to help remove the current president Marcos and support Duterte's daughter into power. But China is not experienced in this kind of operation. We have to hire perhaps, Victoria Nuland to give us a crash course on how to bake those tasty cookies.
May mga suggestions daw sa China community na bakit hindi natin tulungan itong Pilipinas na i-unseat itong si Marcos Jr. Sabi nito, wala silang experience na ganun. Parang pinaparinggan ba ang may ganyang playbook ay yung US talaga. Pag meron silang hindi nagustuhang bansa, i-regime change nila. Ganun. Ito, an experience at walang alam kung paano ang China.
So, if China act aggressively in defending Duterte and his family, it will destroy China's image as an anti-colonial champion. Because by doing that, China will
An anti-colonial champion. Ibig sabihin, no history of colonization ang China. Oo, unlike yung US, marami silang sinakop na mga bansa. Sabi nila, yung China daw mananakop kung kinukuha yung Bakit? May history ba yung China? Wala, di ba? So, ang point niya dito, pagtulungan ng China ang si Duterte, taliwas doon sa kanilang nature na anti-colonial sila. Pag hindi naman nila tulungan, magbibigay ng signal sa mga other countries na pro-China na hindi na sila lalapit sa China kasi baka sila masampulan ng US. So naiipit na ngayon ang China.
be turning into something that it has been speaking out against. But if China do not do anything and choose to ignore, you are also passively allowing the Philippines to potentially turn into the next Ukraine, which might lead to eventual conflict and more suffering among the population in both countries. And furthermore, it discourages other countries from aligning their value with China because the US will go after them as well. Even the more philosophical, advanced geopolitical analysts in China, their opinions today are split on this. But I would say what they all agree on more or less is that probably and eventually China will have to make a stand to win a war in Asia against US or one of US proxy in order to stop this kind of US behavior in the region. China just have to pick when and where. Or perhaps China has an even better plan. Maybe someone like Elon Musk is actually Chinese undercover in United States and is kind of destroying the empire from within at the moment, and China just have to wait and see the result.